is that women have always been practically involved and engaged with the issue of resistance because it affects them the most. So whether it's right to education, a right to health, right to political organizing, or a right to land, for example, that's crucial. All of these are fortes in which women have tried to find their role throughout history of Kashmir. So whenever we have a kind of an assault on these aspects of Kashmiri society, women are the first ones to galvanize the struggle. So what we are seeing now is an attempt to break down those social structures that could offer some kind of respite to women, for fighting against these deprivations that legal governance can create. To simplify it, like a lot of old school laws that were practically present during the Dogra rule of Kashmir, which is about 100 years ago, they are being brought back. So what we're seeing is a kind of like not simply backsliding, but anything that Muslims of Kashmir, nevertheless of their caste, tried to do for last 40 years in terms of their rights to land, in terms of right to education. What we see is that it's kind of all going away. It's slowly kind of being chipped away. And there are great dangers in it, and some of them what we see is that are being talked about, and some of them do not really make it to the news, precisely because all kind of human rights organizing and documentation has been stopped in this region. It's not allowed. Secondly, all kind of social and political institutions that exist, they are being closed. So what is happening is a kind of pandemic of mental health crisis in Kashmir right now, especially for women. And we're seeing like it's surging, and a lot of local media are consistently reporting about the crisis. And it's dangerous because if people feel they have no hope, or they don't, or they can't organize in a way that they can make change, it's pretty difficult to then make sense of what resistance could be, or how resistance can reimagine itself if they cannot even have an organization that is just sitting there talking about education, because the government wants to also control the very aspects of education, like what are Kashmiris being taught in the school, in a way to create an ideological overpowering of Kashmiris as a nation. So to simplify that, so Kashmiris who have kind of been alien to both Indian and Pakistani nationalisms, if they are now subjected to ideological education right in the school, that's the attempt that India is trying to, bring the ideology of Hindutva, but enforcing it on Kashmiris. It's kind of like, if you go to Israel and the Zionists start teaching the Arab kids that you are also Zionist. So that's the level of how extreme this whole process is. So it's like it's breaking down all the civil structures, all the possibilities of political organizing, all the possibilities of civil organizing, to be able to kind of even remember your indigenous history. So, for example, there are a lot of people whose parents, grandparents have been active in the struggle. So the whole process will now criminalize for you to even create a memory of resistance in terms of seeking right to self-determination for Kashmir. So I think it's very dangerous on many, many levels for women, because their bodies become then the sites of ideological warfare. So in 2022, we saw technology make a kind of inroad into the whole process. So a lot of young Indians kind of started to make these apps where they are auctioning Kashmiri women or their pictures that they rip off. I mean, of course, it's a fake auction, but they're kind of ripping off the pictures of Kashmiri journalists, writers, activists, and then putting them on sale on this app to kind of show that that's how much India controls Kashmir, not only its land, but also the bodies of women, and how it makes them kind of sellable, or creates a sort of commodification. So it's a very extreme right-wing Hindu reimagination of Kashmir, where nobody dares to question them, to the point that they also forget the intergenerational nature of the struggle. And that's really like the biggest danger, is that people are forgetting because they are scared for themselves, so they're forgetting what their grandparents were talking about or what the struggle has been about over the time. And it has resulted in this kind of a mental health crisis now. To be honest, I should also mention that I have been away from Kashmir since 2019, because that's the only way we can talk about Kashmir as Kashmiris. Because within Kashmir, it's become really difficult to talk about the real issues. And so most of the media organizations that were active in Kashmir before 2019, they have become more or less like mouthpieces of the government. They are consistently just, promoting a certain narrative that they have been asked to do. There's no real reporting. No one's allowed to criticize or question the kind of the kind of rule that is happening. What's also quite interesting here is that the government themselves are a bit lost now, even though they are trying so much to really push back on Kashmiri autonomy and sovereignty by taking away the land, by removing the rights that people have earned over a decade now, or even talking of women in terms of like commodities. What's happening is also like it hasn't really resulted in decrease in the violence. So what I mean by that is that there is still a consistent pattern in which Kashmiris are engaging in anti-government or anti-India armed struggle. And these have really increased in just last 2-3 days. I was reading some news that there's a pattern of like attacks, that 2025 attacks. So Indian government is forced to kind of even change their high-level military commanders or high-level BSF commanders because they can't contain the violence. So in a way, the whole discussion or the whole media propaganda that we hear from Modi about, oh, I'm going to make Kashmir calm and there'll be no violence and everything will be good, it has backfired, because it doesn't really work. And even their own statistics, even their own data, doesn't show that Kashmir is showing any signs of improvement. And most definitely, it's not a very good sign for Kashmiri women also, in terms of what they had earned so far and how how kind of backsliding is happening in terms of their resistance struggle. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to speak about. So I'm quite happy that I'm here, and I would like to hear from other audiences as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Insha. Thank you for your insights and for your work. Inshallah, now let's move the conversation towards Kashmiris in the prison system, in the Indian prison system. So I'd like to invite Ahmed bin Qasim. Inshallah, Ahmed is a Kashmiri activist and a recent graduate in anthropology from Quaid-e-Azam University. His writings on Kashmir have been published both nationally and internationally. And he's also an associate of Justice for All with our Kashmir Action campaign. Thank you, Ahmed, for being here.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me here, and especially for making Kashmir prisoners making them a part of this conversation. Because when it comes to Kashmiri prisoners, the very idea of why the Indian state imprisons them in the first place is because to kind of invisibilize their existence and to kind of erase them from people's memories. And that's why imprisonment exists in the first place, because obviously there are other forms of oppression and other forms of violence that the Indian state inflicts on the people, but they're very manifest for people to see, and they're part of you know everyday life. People see them and they become part of people's memory. But the thing with prisoners is that once they are removed from the society to which they belong and the communities to which they belong, and not only are they imprisoned, but they are imprisoned and sent to prisons that are thousands of miles away from their homes. So we have Kashmiri prisoners right now who are in Delhi, who are in Rajasthan, who are in Uttar Pradesh, and who are in parts of India that remain inaccessible for most of their family members for reasons pertaining to both financial reasons, where Kashmiri families, most of the Kashmiri families, cannot afford going to Delhi and going to Uttar Pradesh and going to these different parts of India to see their family members. So they can't do it. Now, what's the worst thing that you could do to these families? After already depriving them of their family members and incarcerating them, the next worst thing you could do is to cut off their communication with them. And that is exactly what the Indian state did recently, where it denied Kashmiri prisoners their monthly phone calls with their loved ones. So that phone call was all these prisoners had. Some of these prisoners have been in prison for 6 years, some of them have been in prison for over a decade, some of them have been in prison for over 2 decades. And the only thing that they would have, that they would look forward to, was their phone call with their loved ones. That is what would keep them sane in the conditions of prison. So the Indian state, in order to take this hope away from them and to take this one thing that keeps them sane away from them, told all of these Kashmiri prisoners who have been incarcerated by the National Investigation Agency of India for their participation in the Kashmiri liberation struggle, they were told that they would no longer be allowed to talk to their family members. Letters are not allowed, calls are not allowed. So we haven't heard from them. I haven't heard from my mother. Other children whose mothers and whose fathers are in prison, they haven't heard from their family members. And what we do hear is news stories coming out of India telling us that 10 prisoners or 100 people in New Delhi have died due to heat stroke. And now these are people in India, in Delhi, living at their homes, and they are dying due to heat strokes because of the unprecedented heat that was there in the summer in New Delhi and in other parts of India. Now, these are people who are not even in prisons. They have all the facilities of cooling, they have all the means of cooling. Despite this, they could not withstand the heat. Now, think of the prisoners. They were denied all means of cooling. And when they wrote in New Delhi's Tihar jail, when our prisoners petitioned to jail authorities and told them, we don't have any means of cooling, there is inaccessibility of water. Water would be allowed for 15 minutes in the morning, and you had to gather as much water as you could for these 15 minutes. And you had to spend 24 hours using this water then. The ceiling fan was of no use because the temperature had risen so much that it would actually give out hot air. So there was no point having a ceiling fan. And high voltage bulbs were kept on all day, even during daytime, that would emit further heat just to torment and torture these prisoners. Now, when some of these prisoners, for example, like Ashraf Sehrai and Altaf Shah recently, when some of these prisoners die in Indian prisons, their deaths are presented as natural, normal medical deaths. And that is how Indian state registers those deaths. But these are not natural, normal deaths. These are systematic murders, where the Indian state creates conditions in prison, creates conditions and manufactures conditions in which death is what these Kashmiri prisoners are pushed towards. And they're taken to the verge of their death. And when they're about to die, they are taken to a hospital so that the Indian state can say, we took them to a hospital and they died there. We are not liable and we are not culpable. So when these prisoners, Kashmiri prisoners, are in prison, we have to understand they are effectively in their own graveyards because the likelihood of them coming out of these prisons alive is very little, because the Indian state plans on keeping them there, because these were people who the people of Kashmir would gather around when it came to the liberation struggle, when it came to the freedom struggle, when it came to the question of their rights. So there is a kind of a twofold oppression here. These people are being incarcerated and they are being sent to prisons, but the people on the ground are also being deprived of the presence of these people, because in some ways the people would pivot around them, they would gather around them. So by jailing every single Kashmiri, both the resistance leadership we have, but also the grassroots leaders that we would have at neighborhood levels who could mobilize people, the Indian state has denied Kashmiri people of their leadership, of their presence, and that too for a reason. So when it comes to Kashmiri prisoners, for instance, we had a Kashmiri prisoner recently who required urgent surgery from a because the doctors, the prison doctors, recommended that she needs urgent surgery, otherwise she might become immobile for the rest of her life. Now, this Kashmiri female prisoner, when she was taken to a hospital, first of all, she was not taken to hospital for months and months and months. And when she was finally taken to a hospital, what is fascinating here, and also in some ways very depressing, is that it's not only the Indian state that we are up against, we are also up against a very hostile social fabric of the Indian nation state, where the hospital staff refused to treat her just because she was a Kashmiri Muslim woman. And they said, we won't see her, we won't treat her. And the hospital staff is telling the jail staff that don't bring Kashmiri prisoners to this hospital again. We're not going to treat them. And the doctor on duty, she was a woman herself, and the Kashmiri prisoner was also a woman. This doctor, female doctor, refused to see her because she said she's quote unquote a terrorist. So I'm not going to see her. So this is what we are up against. And this is what we have to understand, that we are not merely up against a hostile Indian state, but we are up against a society where the demonization of Muslims generally, but Kashmiri Muslims specifically, because Kashmiri Muslims are seen as the kind of archetypal bad Muslims, right? Even when Indian Muslims, sometimes the Indian state has to demonize them, especially the ruling Hindu Nationalist Party, they say to Indian Muslims that you're all Kashmiri Muslims, or you're all like Kashmiri Muslims in reality, right? You're all on the inside, you're all Kashmiri Muslims, right? So the idea is that to be a bad Muslim means to be a Kashmiri Muslim. So this elevation of Kashmiri Muslim as the example of the bad Muslim who has to be repressed, who has to be domesticated, reflects in stories like these, where you have hospitals that otherwise should be the last places where this hatred should manifest, but it manifests very strongly in places like these as well. So there's one particular thing that we also ought to keep in mind is that, and I say this very often, but I'm going to use this opportunity to say it again, that when it comes to Kashmiri prisoners, until we realize that the problem is not that these Kashmiri prisoners are not being given a fair trial under Indian law. This is a theme that I see. Unfortunately, it's just not going away. Where even with Justice for All and other human rights organizations that are trying to work on Kashmir, when they send memos on Kashmiri prisoners to different institutes and different organizations, there's an idea that comes from these human rights organizations or different states that they ask for fair trial for Kashmiri prisoners. But the problem is that when it comes to Kashmiri prisoners, fair trial really is not going to save them. And the reason is that because the legal system that the Indian state has constructed and the juridical system itself allows for the imprisonment of Kashmiris. What I mean to say is that there are laws in place that actually legally justify, not morally. So we create a distinction here between the legal and the moral. The detention of Kashmiri prisoners, obviously is immoral on all accounts. But if you ask specifically, is this detention illegal? If the law is Indian, then the detention is not illegal, because the Indian law has been designed in a way that these detentions are actually justified through acts such as Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, for example, which says that any individual who creates disaffection against the Indian state is a terrorist, could be imprisoned from 5 to 7 years. Now, a colonized population, an occupied population, what do you expect them to feel and express for their colonizer other than disaffection. That's the only thing they are going to express. Now, the same law, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, there's another clause in the same act which says that anybody who threatens or questions the national sovereignty or the territorial integrity of the Indian nation state is a terrorist. Now, for the Indian state, the occupation of Kashmir and the possession of Kashmir is part of its sense of national sovereignty and its territorial integrity. And all the liberation actors in Kashmir, all the people who are pro self determination, obviously they are denying the fact that the Indian state has any sovereignty over Kashmir. So obviously their movement and their activism translates into a challenge to the national sovereignty of India and to its territorial integrity, the violence of the map, where Kashmiris refuse to be part of the imagination of what India is. They refuse to be part of it. So that again translates into terrorism. So the problem here is not that the Indian state is not properly applying the law or that the judges are biased. You could place a very reasonable judge, but if he has to judge according to this law, Kashmiri prisoners are not going to come out. Now, it's a separate story that the judges nowadays in Kashmir, the judges who are overseeing the cases of Kashmiri prisoners are so hostile towards Kashmiri prisoners that recently one of our prisoners, he had petitioned in front of a judge seeking communication with the family member, with a small daughter who was ill, and he wanted to talk to her, so he petitioned in the court. And the judge told this prisoner when the hearing was happening that you should have thought about it before becoming what they call Athankvadi, which means terrorist. So you should have thought about it. Now that you're part of the self-determination movement, that justifies the fact that we won't allow you to talk to your ailing daughter. So these are the judges. So sometimes the judge appears as more hostile than the state's lawyer as well, where it is the judge who is actually kind of defending the detention. He's not actually overseeing the case, he's making a case for the detention itself. So this is what Kashmiri prisoners are facing right now. No communication with family members, no medicine, put in conditions that even you would not want to put animals in. That is the level of dehumanization. And if you tell this to the people on social media, you will see Hindu nationalists in your comment section justifying each and every single act of this oppression. That's the level of dehumanization that has happened over the past few years. But obviously, this did not start in 2014. This has been going on as a process of colonization systemic since 1947. I think I would stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. I know it's not a easy thing because this is directly impacting your own family as well. To talk about these issues, it's hard enough to talk about them when they're not directly impacting your family. So, Jazakallah khair for consistently being a voice about this. So at this point, I wanted to move the conversation towards examining the impact on Kashmiris that are not in prison, that are in supposedly their homeland, and how this occupation is impacting their daily lives, the way they do business, the way they run their shops. What is happening to the people in occupied Kashmir? So to discuss this, please welcome Dr. Mubin Shah. Dr. Mubin Shah is the former president of the Kashmir Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's the director of Kashmir House Turkey and senior vice chairman of the Kashmir Diaspora Coalition, which is one of such a great step in collecting the different voices of the Kashmiri diaspora. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Mubin.
Thank you for including me in this panel. And already the two speakers have spoken about two different aspects of Kashmir, and particularly the women as well as the prisoners. And when we are discussing here with the panelists from Palestine, we see there's so much similarity between what India is doing and what Israel is doing in Palestine. Now, in regard to the subject of economic situation in Kashmir, this after 2019, India, one of the main things and disinformation it is putting up into the world is that economically Kashmir is doing much better after 2019. It was held up because of this 370 article and all. And I would like to focus on those basic points which expose this disinformation of economic betterment. If after August 2019, the economic situation in Indian administered Kashmir deteriorated significantly, the revocation of Article 370 led to a severe lockdown, including a prolonged internet shutdown, which all of us know, and which caused a major economic slump with the Kashmir Chamber of Commerce, of which I used to be a president, and industry, estimating losses of around $5.3 billion within 10 months. Key sectors like agriculture, horticulture, tourism, and handicraft experienced at least a 50% drop in earnings. You see, it will be interesting to note that J&K faces one of the highest unemployment rates in India today. The periodic labor force survey 2023 reported an unemployment rate of 16%, which is significantly above the Indian average of 7.8%. Youth unemployment is particularly severe, with the rates for individuals aged 15 to 29 reaching 22%. Now, after 2019, the Indian state has removed the preferential state contract quota, and toll taxation system has been changed for imported industrial goods, which have left most of the J&K's nascent industries sick and unable to compete, and the units which were working have become sick. The number of sick industrial units in Kashmir has significantly become much more, with many businesses struggling. The Kashmir Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as the Federation Chamber of Industries, has reported that the Department of Industry has not effectively addressed these issues, leading to ongoing difficulties for local small-scale units. They have criticized the state government failure to adhere to policies designed for revival and rehabilitation of sick units. They have completely failed in reviving all these sick units, which have been in thousands. The only reason I feel is that in the future, the local industry will be taken over by businesses from India at throwaway price. This is the only reason why they should not, support these revival of these industries. Now, on the other hand, the J&K's fiscal health is precarious, with a debt to GSDP ratio of 49%, for above the recommended limit of 20 to 25% for other so-called states in India. The Union Territory is facing mounting financial pressure as the total liability has swelled to rupees 1.1 crores in 2023. In the 10 years of BJP NDA rule direct from the center, all Jammu and Kashmir has received is crippling debt. The powers that talking about a Naya Jammu and Kashmir, but what they forget to tell everyone is that the only legacy is one of back-breaking interest payments and a financial crisis. Today, the average disposable income in J&K is 15% lower than the national average of India, and which is considered to be booming. And J&K continues to have a substantial public debt, with low disposable income among its lower and middle classes, beginning to negatively impact the consumer market and real estate market. There is all the time seen an unfavorable deposit to advance ratio in the banking sector, which is one of the most important things, with our deposit being utilized in India, which has been true from the very beginning. We used to have a credit deposit ratio of 18%. That means if 100 rupees were deposited by Kashmiris in Kashmiri banks, 82 rupees were being invested in other parts of India, not in Kashmir. The most concerning of all is the crippling energy crisis, by people not getting power for even to the extent of 16 hours a day. This is debilitating not only the industries extra, but due to climate change, the unprecedented high temperatures have added the woes of people, particularly in Jammu region, although the power cuts are prominent in winters in the Kashmir region. Our resources of energy are being sent to India as they own and occupy the majority of our hydro projects, wherein some have not been returned to the state, although they have earned much more than what they have invested in them, and for which the Kashmiris have been clamoring for the return for a long time. I will conclude with the latest information I have got is that the viceroy, which we call the lieutenant governor, who is ruling the state, he's just like a viceroy of prior when the British used to rule India, has put in a place of policy of giving clearances to investments of a certain amount, for which documents have been prepared, for which prime assets for tourism, particularly of a corporation called Jammu and Kashmir Tourism Trading Corporation, and people who know and Kashmir, they have prime assets in tourist places like Gulmarg, Pahalgam, and Srinagar, with famous prime assets like Chashma Shahi Huts, are going to be sold to Indian corporations of Reliance as well as Adani. I have been informed that in these assets are also the golf courses. And this is because of their putting in a law that a certain amount of money, if any corporate invests, they will be given necessary clearance within days under the garb of doing business very fast. And by this, they are going to take over all our assets. And in addition to these, you see, there is a domicile sword on our businessmen, particularly the tourism players who have got hotels in Gulmarg, Pahalgam, and other places where their leases have not yet been extended by the state government, and which can be easily at any point of time sold to these corporations. This is the model by which India is going to occupy all our economic spaces. And this is going to be the most damaging thing in the future, besides naturally our political rights and other rights, human rights. But this is also going to be very, 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 very damaging for the future of Kashmir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. That's your insight on that, and the latest figures are definitely something noteworthy, and many people who follow are probably not are not aware of these figures. So at this point, I'd like to invite our next guest, Ali Ramadan, who's originally a natural health influencer, and he's Palestinian himself and became an activist for Palestine, amassing over 850 K followers on Instagram, and more, lots of followers on TikTok as well. He actively hosts panel discussions on Palestine, featuring journalists, doctors, and eyewitnesses from Gaza. So Ali, as someone who's transitioned from health advocacy to political activism, what has been your experience in amplifying the voices of Palestinians, particularly focusing on the dehumanization they face under Zionist policies?
Well, a lot of the challenges that we face as myself as a Palestinian, and a lot of the challenges that I feel activists for Palestine feel, is always having to repeat stuff like, these people are human, or they want to live. Look, they want to live. Look, they're not extremists. Look, they're not terrorists. They want to live. It's like we always have to kind of repeat that line to people. And like, my panels are generally directed towards the Western audience. So we have people who are speaking in Arabic, and then they're saying stuff like, they pulled out of Khan Yunis today, for example. So Khan Yunis is a district in Gaza, and the IOF was had a military invasion there, where they had an incursion and they killed over 300 people in a matter of days. They injured a few hundred people as well. And between the time they told people to leave and the time of the first strike was 15 minutes. So people, as they were leaving, were getting killed. So when the IDF or the IOF, I like to say, because they're not defending anything, so people like to say the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, but they're really the Israeli Occupation Forces, or the Israeli Terrorist Forces, if you want to call them that. But so when they pulled out of Khan Yunis, the journalists were telling me about a story of how people started to go back, and they opened up a market, and they had fruit and these kind of things. So his point is that people, they love life and they deserve to live, and they're doing everything they can to make the most of everything. So I mean, what I find is that they are always trying to humanize themselves, always trying to show people like, okay, we're not extremists, we're not like ISIS, we're not like, this is not what this is about. Like when we talk about resistance is every right of an occupied people. And Palestinians, this didn't start on October 7th. Like October 7th was not created in a vacuum. And what the West tried to do and Western media tried to do is completely dehumanize Palestinians, create false narratives about what happened on October 7th, and manufacture consent in order to create a genocide, where on day 303 of this genocide, there has been, in just since October 7th, 39,583 Palestinians that have been murdered, and 91,398 injuries. And when we say injuries, these are not normal injuries. These are people with half their heads blown off. These are people with their arms torn off. These are people with their legs gone. These are people with full body burns. I know a lady actually that joined my panel. Her name is Hidayah Mahmoud. So she joined my panel. She's had full body burns from 1995 during an Israeli shelling on her place in Gaza in 1995. Till this day, till today, she has to do surgeries almost every month to take care of those the injuries from those burns. I mean, this is the kind of injuries that we're talking about. When people see 91,000 injuries, they might think it's a scratch or like a little bit of blood, but it's the most gruesome, most horrific things. And most of the casualties are children. When we're looking at 39,500 or 39,500 or so people, there's 16,314 children. That's just children. And the thing is that we also, as Palestinians, we always try to say women and children. It's like we also forget the men, because we want people to humanize us by looking at the women and children and saying that they're being killed. So the men, one of my friends, his name is Akram. He's a man of men, and he was in the north of Gaza, and he went through the first month where they took over the north, and they bombarded the north like crazy, through the siege, through the starvation, through Ramadan as well, through all this, through Eid, through the other Eid, and he got killed. And this guy's a family man. His wife is pregnant. He has a son named Ali, 28 years old. 28 years old. He got killed while filling up water for orphan children that need water. This is the type of people that they're killing in Gaza. These are the men that they're killing in Gaza. And we try to humanize ourselves and our movement by saying, but look, 16,314 children, 10,980 women that have been killed, 35 children that have been killed from starvation. Like when we're talking about also 16,314 children that have been murdered, these are just children that arrived to the hospitals. These are not children that have not showed up. These are not children that are under the rubble. These are not children that have been starved to death. These are not children that have died due to lack of medication. These are not children that have have gone missing or have been taken by the IOF, because children, about 5,000 Palestinians from Gaza alone have been taken. And I heard you guys talking about prisoners. 5,000 people alone were taken from Gaza as prisoners to the occupation prisons. And 9,900 Palestinians from the West Bank have been taken just since October 7. Just since October 7. If you like, I can go more into this if you want. The 9,900 people from the prisons, 86 of them are women and 250 of them are children. And they're taken to military prisons. This is not normal prisons. This is prisons where they're systematically tortured. An analysis just on how they're tortured: physical abuse, stress positions, forcing them to maintain stressful positions for long periods of time. For example, like how when your teacher used to make you stand against the wall with your knees bent, just so you can have that muscle fatigue, verbal abuse, sleep deprivation, shackling and restraint, solitary confinement, verbal abuse, humiliation, medical negligence, exposure to extreme temperatures, also use of family members. For example, we had one person, Ibrahim Salim, and I like to say their names because we have to humanize them. His house was bombed during the war and 6 of his family members were killed. This is while he was in a Sidi Timan secret prison. This is a prison where they systematically torture people. A few days ago, one of the people was raped, and he was taken. It was a gang rape actually, and he was taken after to a hospital in the occupation, and he was killed in the hospital. That's a Sidi Timan. That's a secret prison. Palestinians don't have any access to any of the information that comes out of there. His house was bombed and 6 of his family members were killed while he was taken as a prisoner. He was a witness to the storming of the Kamal Adwan hospital when they went in during the initial periods of the war, of the genocide, and he accompanied injured children in intensive care. 2 of his brothers were killed during his arrest. He underwent 3 operations inside the prisons due to torture, and his family were buried inside the Kamal Adwan. During the investigation, they would show him pictures of his family's graves and how they took them out of their graves, and they would show him that just to torture him. This is, and while he was in jail, he lost 40 kilos. He was just released recently.
SubhanAllah. Ali, I know there is so much that we can do.
There's so much. And I felt like I said everything that's the most important for me to bring out. And I wanted everyone to know. There's just one more information. If there's something that I want everyone to know, 1.74 million people in Gaza have infectious disease right now, out of a population of 2.5 million. People need to know these numbers. These are all numbers and statistics, but these are numbers and statistics that really, like, it breaks hearts. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.
I totally understand. We have been making ICC filings on Gaza, and the research and that goes into each one of the submissions, each one of those incidents. That's one of the pledge that Justice for All made, that we would not put them all together and make 1 or 2 reports and just be done with it. We made an active decision to highlight each incident, and it takes much longer, obviously much more involuntary, the work is much more, but each one of the people deserves that the least we can do is file a case for each one of them. And this is something that perhaps needs to be done for Kashmir as well. And this is something that our teams are discussing. I wanted to bring all of you on and to really, as someone who is not directly impacted, but working on both issues, I see so many similarities. But as people who are directly impacted, who are much more invested in these struggles, how do you see the struggles of the Kashmiri and Palestinian people intersecting? And what can be learned from each other's experiences to strengthen global solidarity and advocacy efforts? So this is my question to all of you. Feel free to go ahead, inshallah. Ahmed, you want to start first?
Yeah, I think I would just, I would actually like to hear more from Brother Ali on this question specifically, but I think I would just say just very briefly in a minute. It's not just that these two struggles are similar, it's also that these two struggles are one. In the sense that if you walk the streets of Kashmir right now, in this moment, for an occupied population itself, the fact that you would find graffitis and murals saying Free Palestine and Save Gaza tells you a lot. And the fact that we haven't had Jummah prayers in our masajid because the Indian state fears that the Jummah prayer would turn into a protest for Palestine says a lot. And the fact that we have people in prison right now who were recently detained during the month of Muharram, during the processions, because the Muharram procession turned into a site of pro-Palestinian solidarity, again, shows you that it's not just that these two struggles are similar, but also that they are one in both what they seek to do and also in the oppressors. I mean, if you look at who has allied with Israel most strongly and who Israel has its most sophisticated arms and defense trades with. So it's the Indian state we're talking about. So a bullet that is manufactured in Tel Aviv hits a person in Srinagar, and a shell that is manufactured in Delhi recently was found in Gaza. So we're not just talking about two struggles that there are some parallels. No, Israel makes a bullet, we face it in Kashmir. India makes a shell, kills a Palestinian life. So the struggles are one.
Insha, would you like to?
Yeah. I think that more than the struggle, that what I'm really intrigued by is the fact that there are similarities, but there are also differences. For Kashmiris, because we have been sort of cut out from the world, because India has taken very, stepwise measures to keep Kashmiris outside of the public attention. So for a lot of Palestinians or Middle Easterners, Kashmir is something, but it's not really something they identify with or know a lot about, right? So I think there is a need to have a one-on-one engagement between the two struggles, because I think to get to know each other more at the intellectual level between the writers, scholars, I think more forums where we can discuss and know about each other's work. And second thing is also the timing, because right now I think the kind of situation that we have in Gaza, it doesn't allow for it to create such solidarity in a way, because the crisis that is unfolding, it's a genocide, to put it squarely. it is a genocide, and we are moving towards a sort of regional instability, because with Israel kind of weighing around a war with Iran, and then a possibility of getting involved all the other Arab nations. So when it becomes a sort of regional war, then what do we see? We actually see nobody will care much about Palestinians even more, right? So there are, and that's also what happens around the Indian subcontinent, because Kashmiri struggle is talked about when somebody is bleeding on the streets, but then it kind of goes away because now everything seems like normalized. So, but if India and Pakistan go to war, then again, you have a very difficult situation for Kashmiris. So a consolidated effort is not only in terms of how do we emotionally relate to each other or how do we identify each other's struggle, but I think it's also important to have consolidated engagement in the times when nobody, hopefully there's no bleeding happening. So it's kind of intellectual exchange that is quite necessary and important. And I think at the moment also, if we as Kashmiri thinkers, writers, activists can put our attention to support Gaza more in whatever way, we should also consider that, because it's a very, very extreme situation as I see it from here. So Ali talked about safe zones and being given 15 minutes, but we also know that safe zones have been bombarded. So it's pretty much like there is a kind of political will to, by hook or crook, remove all Gazans from here and take the land, because that's what it is. And for Kashmiris also, it gets consolidated ultimately to that very thing that, okay, how do we, either Kashmiris declare themselves that they're Indians, and then we'll deal with them like we deal with the Dalits or the outcasts as per the Hindu ideology, right? So then Kashmiris will not have to ask for any rights, right? So they can't say, oh, we don't have good condition for prisoners, because come on, you are good as, because the whole structure of Hinduism is very hierarchical. They want to leave Kashmiris outside of that and treat them accordingly. And the other thing is, okay, let's take away their land, because that's what they are doing. So when they came into power, they declared the whole land government land. And that was a very sly move, because now they can go to anybody's house and say, you have illegally acquired this land in 1947, and this house is not legal. So basically, a similar policy that we see, unfolded in Gaza. So it's, sorry if I'm putting a damper in our emotions and feelings here, but I think we also need to be pragmatic and realistic about what is possible. And I think, a continued engagement, a continued understanding. Somebody also asked a question about if intellectuals and thinkers and writers and activists are protected. No, they're not. None of us are protected in any possible way. And we are really just protected by Allah in that sense. So I think we can definitely provide spaces in places where spaces are possible. And I think that's mostly in the West, because right now, with Middle East going really up in flames, we have very limited places to have such engagements even. So yeah, at the very least, I think we need to have a consolidated, educational or a kind of educational system where we can talk to each other and learn more and know each other's work. If someone's an artist, someone's a writer, and kind of like get that thing rolling. I think this is the ideal time to do that, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you, Insha. Definitely, and no, not a damper. It's good to be pragmatic, and that's where advocacy efforts, we learn to live in the world as it is, working towards what we want it to be, but we have to face reality and what can we do in the current situation as a genocide takes place in Gaza, and there are genocide alerts in for Kashmir. Dr. Mubin, love to hear your thoughts.
No, my thoughts are regarding because in my understanding, Kashmir is already gone through a genocide. It is already genocide, because if you see the description of a genocide, our three, and I have we have documented it in the sense that almost 3.5 million people have been directly affected by the number of people killed, by the number of people imprisoned, and all that. And if you take 10 people of each family, which is an extended family, 3.5 million people have been affected in Kashmir directly. So, number one is that. Number two is this thing that what we learn from Palestine is this thing that, and actually the world should learn about it, that if something like this happens in Kashmir, what Hamas do it in Palestine, and if it happens in Kashmir, what will be the catastrophe to the whole region? Because unfortunately, in the case of Palestine, the Arab world did not react the way they should have, or for that matter, the Muslim world. We Kashmiris expect Pakistan to be better if something like that happens to us, and it will be a catastrophe. And what has the world to learn from that is that possibility should not be there. They should settle this problem as per the aspirations of the Kashmiri people. And what we learn from Palestinians is this thing, that how they have been able to change the narrative in the Western world has it been because of the people, the general public has realized that Israel is doing whatever they are doing and atrocities against the Palestinian people, which up till now was not there. The governments are as it is, but the public is changed, particularly in the United States and in Europe and all, which has not been the case yet with Kashmir. Why? Because maybe that we do not have a very big diaspora which is working on this. We have tried to do it, but not to that level, and is the world waiting for something like that, something like this, what has happened in Gaza to Kashmir, in Kashmir specific, and it is going to go there. If you see the latest reports of armed action by the freedom fighters against the Indian army, which is reached a stage where that can happen, and then anything can happen. Number one. Number two is also this thing we have to understand, that India either follows Israel or Israel follows India. Same model, everything in the same model. How to occupy a place, how to put in the laws by which they can occupy this place, and then tell legally that to the world that this was legally done. It was they have what you call collaborators within Kashmir who are helping them out in that, and by giving an image of democracy, which Israel also does. Israel has done. It says it is the only democratic country in the Middle East, and India also does the same. So because of that, and as Ahmed also told, that the laws are such, have been designed as such, that you can't get relief from the Indian courts. You see, when I used to be, before 2019, when I used to speak in somewhere internationally, or some people would say, India is a democratic country. India has laws. India has justice system. India has this thing. And I saw for myself when I was arrested, the laws did not work. What worked was the American pressure. That is 100% sure that American pressure, because of that, I was released. Nothing else. So law doesn't make a difference. So this is where the world has to make a choice. You see, today also in the case of Palestine, you have to understand that until unless the United States of America and Europe change their policy, unfortunately, the Palestinians have to suffer. And the change can be only done by the people of these countries. And this is where Palestinians are making a success as slowly, but not to that extent that the policy makers make a change. This is what I feel, and we have to work. And it is very important that in here also in Turkey, whenever I have an opportunity, I go to attend the Palestinian conferences. Even in Malaysia, I did attend. But there, every time I felt what they were saying, we had already seen it, and we are seeing it in Kashmir. Whether economically, whether otherwise, whether in courts, whether in taking prisoners. Yes, the Palestinians have they have documented certain things. We have not yet documented so many things. We have similar type of things before from 1990s. Our people have been treated so bad in the prisons of India that all others will become ashamed of what India is.
You're so right. I keep thinking, what if we had Instagram or TikTok in the 80s and 90s, and what occurred then to Kashmiri population was broadcast onto people's phones? How would we be looking? I mean, that is one thing that kudos to Palestinian journalists and social media, using social media to, despite their pain, being able to broadcast their genocide. So that
even as a small activist like me, I am banned on Facebook and Twitter within Kashmir. My post cannot be seen. I am not such a big, I don't have so many followers and all that, but still, they are afraid of even people like me, and they have transnational repression. You see what we have seen lately, the killings of Palestinians outside Palestine, and even in Iran. We are anticipating the same thing in Kashmir for Kashmiris also. We are under pressure all the time.
We hear it in the United States a lot, especially with the killing of the Sikh activist and freedom fighter in Canada. Then we saw in New York, London. So the Indian state has been targeting Sikh folks who are pro-liberation. So we're seeing
they have done for the Kashmiris in Pakistan itself.
Another thing that I feel like is that I see in common is the rising of this fascist ideology that is also fueling, which is the Zionist ideology in Israel, and as well as the Hindutva ideology that is again reigniting even those. It's almost become cultish in the way it's impacting the folks who would probably did not know or would not have stood for these atrocities in their name, but now they are, right? So that is something that I'd like to get your thoughts on. Ali? I think we have to unmute you. Oops, no, or we can't hear you. Yeah, you're not muted on our end. While Ali's getting that together, Dr. Mohammed Abdul-Jabbar has asked that Israel is targeting the leaders of the resistance, and so is India. Are there enough security measures for our leaders of Kashmir in order to avoid intellectual and physical loss? Question to you, Ahmed.
I mean, short answer is no. They aren't, obviously. So obviously the dynamic when it comes to Kashmiri prisoners, Kashmiri leaders, is that we have Kashmiri leaders in Kashmir. Obviously all of them are in prison, and the rest of them, some of them are in Pakistan, exiled either recently or since the 90s, and we have seen their systemic assassinations in the past year or so, where quite a handful of them have been assassinated while they were in mosques, at their homes, in market. And obviously, Pakistan maintains, its government maintains that it's the Indian state carrying out all the assassinations. And I mean, it's not just a claim, because Modi, in one of his speeches, actually, this is the kind of the rogueness of the Indian state, is that he actually confessed by saying that we are going to kill you in your own homes. And Balki, he said that we kill you at your own homes. And so they're not safe. I mean, there was a time when Kashmiris would move out, and they would think that they would seek safety elsewhere. But Kashmiris in Pakistan and even in Turkey and elsewhere, the Indian state kind of learning from Israel, and there's a conversation actively going on in India that we ought to learn from Mossad and do what Mossad did. And as India grows as an economic power, and as the world feeds into its sense of impunity, that you can do whatever you want, at best there's going to be a statement, sometimes maybe even not that. So obviously that creates that culture of impunity, where these powerful states like India and Israel, they think that they can go around killing people even in third countries, and nobody is going to do anything. And that's what has been happening, because the idea is the Indian state has already in some ways exterminated the local leadership. Either they're dead or they're in prison. So what remains? What remains is the people who are outside, and they're still trying to keep the conversation going. They're trying to keep the cause alive. Now the Indian state is saying, "Look, we're done with the grassroots. Now these people are bothering us, so it's best if we kind of focus the attention there." So that is something that has been happening. As for what security measures could be taken for them, obviously that is not for Kashmiri leaders or human rights organizations to discuss. I mean, this is obviously depending on the governments that are there in place in the countries in which they are living. It's upon them to protect them. And Pakistan should have been the last place where our people um, should be getting assassinated, but people have been assassinated. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Ali, good to have you back. You're not able to, yeah, we're not able to hear you. I don't know what's going on. Let me ask to unmute, perhaps. Oh, that's a shame. Inshallah, perhaps we can have Ali back on for an episode of the Justice for All Now show. Ahmed, I'd love to perhaps bring you all back and have a further discussion, maybe bring some Palestinian women's activists as well, who are documenting some of the work and the atrocities that are being committed against women in Palestine as well, and be sort of conduit to have further conversations, as Dr. Insha was suggesting. As we end this, any other actions for our supporters, our listeners, people who are watching, and if you guys, Dr. Insha, any? Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ali.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Ali. I think there is some bigger conspiracy going on here. I think that it's important to understand while we're going through all this difficult situation. It's important to take care of our mental health. That's my first suggestion, because it's very normal in this current atmosphere to lose sight of what is long-term and what is short-term. There isn't a lot of possibility I see as a political thinker or a scientist to really give hope. But I think the hope would be that we continue to do our work in our small ways that's possible, that can then add up to become something more crucial. I think on Kashmir, we have faced some significant some significant problems in terms of, like, as Dr. Mubin earlier pointed out, is that we don't have, we haven't done systematic human rights work. Whatever we have done is very little, and there is a possibility that whatever you do gets completely wiped out, because that's how India deals with anything related to Kashmir. And so what happens is we have writers, we have thinkers who have been writing, let's say, back in 47, back in 53, back in 60s. And now we don't even have a basic encyclopedia in place to know who our political leaders have been, or who were the women's rights activists, maybe they were trying to struggle in 1953, because we have had these cyclical ups and downs in Kashmir, where we had these phases of armed struggle, we've had these phases of mass revolutions, and then we've had intellectuals who have kind of written in those periods. In my latest work, what I'm trying to do is I'm kind of trying to locate some of these writers and thinkers and what they were saying. And but we don't have a systematic place where, like if we take Kurdish studies as an example, for instance, you can just go up to an encyclopedia on the Kurds and you can get all the information you need about who the writers are, who the thinkers are. So some of that work gets sidelined and it completely gets removed because we don't have that space. So any of the people who are working in this arena, I think these are things that need preservation, that need proper filing, that need proper, even for the 1980s struggle, we don't even have basic bios of people who were involved, right? So that, not even Wikipedia links, like that's something as simple as that. So what we're doing is, if we don't preserve any of that, we are enabling a kind of, loss of our history that India is very happy to do. So not only is it about going in the street and fighting, but it's also about archiving our struggle in a way that it's easy and accessible. Because in every 10 years, when the tide turns, people come looking for these resources and they can't find them. So maybe 10 years from now, they want to know if there was ever a woman political scientist who wrote anything about Kashmir, and they wouldn't find me, So it's not just about me, but I think, or even the kind of struggle Dr. Mobines went through, like it's not documented, there's not a systematic understanding. Or with Ahmed and Dr. Ran movement. I was I think the first one to write about the movement itself and what it was trying to do at the social political level. Apart from that, I think not many scholarly works have been done. So I think it would be very good for Kashmir movement to actually first encash what we have done so far, and preserve it, and then continue in a more systematic way to see how we can bring issues related to like human rights, prisoners' rights, and all of those other issues that you're all kind of documenting and working towards in a more systematic way against the backdrop of the larger political, social history and culture, right? So that would be my advice or thinking in general.
And I'd like to do a little pitch for our Kashmir timeline. I believe it's one of the first of its kind. We document, we're trying to go back, but as things happen, we're documenting what has occurred. So it's a digital timeline on Kashmir Action, our website for Justice for All's work on Kashmir. And that was one of the ideas originally, was to connect as much, at least what's available on the internet, to the timeline, so that someone can go to a particular year, and then someone passed away, someone was killed, someone was arrested, that could be. And so any help that and someone wants to donate resources that we can upload on there. So that is something that we did want to have that curated in one place. And please do get in touch with Ahmed if someone is willing to be a part of that, inshallah. Ahmed, would you like the last word as we wrap this up, inshallah?
Yeah, I think that part of why these conversations are important is because I've realized that human beings, all of us, we are very quick to become desensitized. And I think Gaza has taught us that I know people who were following everything that was happening in Gaza very intimately in the first few months, and they would not sleep, and they would not eat, and they would not do anything else. And I'm not saying that they don't care about Gaza anymore, but somehow time has this, pacifying effect where, because it's constantly coming. At one point, you feel like it's just how things are.
Is my
I
audio
think,
working?
Yes, Ali.
yeah, it is.
Oh my God.
I'm kidding.
Sorry, guys.
I think you were censored by Israelis who didn't want us to hear you, but yeah.
I swear to God, I'm pretty sure that's the case. I'm just putting in I also switched my phone and like logged in and but yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I think one thing that I feel the people of Kashmir need to do is more education. If there's one thing I need you guys to do is more education, more videos, more like videos that have the potential to go viral. Even if people of even if because we're all brothers and sisters anyways. Even if people of Kashmir kind of um, talk about the Palestinian cause while showing how it's similar to the Kashmiri cause, kind of bringing that attention to each other. I feel like it is an important thing for the people of Kashmir to be able to do. And me as a Palestinian, I feel like this is perfectly fine for anyone of any Kashmiri people to do, to be able to, even if they have to use the popularity of the Palestinian cause in order to bring light to the Kashmiri cause. It's very important that people know about this. I personally don't know enough about the Kashmiri cause. A lot of the stuff that I learned, that I heard today was new to me, to be honest. So I feel like education is one of those very, very important things. And like mashallah, you guys are doing a great job at. I think just like you guys are saying, it's kind of difficult to um, get the Palestinians while they're under, let's say, a genocide to be able to talk about the Kashmiri cause, or even the people of Kashmir while they're under a genocide as well, being able to talk about the Palestinian cause. I think, but using the cause to kind of cross educate, especially that's going to start with the people of Kashmir, their brothers and sisters in Pakistan, Bangladesh. It's going to start more from that region, the education, and it's going to pull our way. I hope that makes sense. But also having these kind of sessions is important. Personally, if people were to come join my panel, I just posed, I had 200 people watching on my live. So if someone, let's say, were to join and talk about some of the Kashmiri the Kashmiri cause, while let's say there's a little bit of a downtime. Usually there's not a lot of downtime because there's artillery shelling almost 24 hours a day happening in Gaza. But there is times where we are able to, let's say, bring up a guest, or if I'm given, let's say, some time in advance, I can work someone in to kind of give some time to talk about the cause, because I feel like it is something that is important. I feel like every single person that's fighting for the Palestinian cause should give a few minutes, at least, to the people of Kashmir to be able to talk about, because the cause is very similar. As what I'm learning and what I'm hearing, the cause is very similar, and we as people of haq, people of truth, people of justice, it doesn't matter if it's my family or your family, we're all one family.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, and thank you for sticking it out with us, Ali. Thank you to all our speakers for sharing their insights and experiences today. Your voices are crucial in highlighting the realities that are faced by Palestinians and Kashmiris. And when we look at this, it's mashallah, when we are analyzing this, it's easy enough to, when I think about this, and I think often that sometimes it just becomes numbers. And incidents and attacks, and the human impact of it is lost. And having you all come here and talk about it, talk about your work, talk about your experiences, for me, it re-emphasizes that these are our brothers and sisters. These are real people, and it's not just a report I'm reading on my desk, or a news article that I'm reading, or a submission that we're making. These are, it makes it so much more real. So aside from all of your work, I just wanted to personally thank all of you for doing that.
One more thing, use TikTok as much as you guys can. TikTok is the way to educate. Even if it comes to doing panels, you do them on TikTok, you are going to get more traffic that's coming through. I just feel like it is a good platform to use. There are words that you can't use on TikTok, like that's censored, like censored words. If let's say you wanted those list of words, I can always give them to you. But TikTok is an amazing platform. What helped boost the Palestinian cause was TikTok. Like 1000%. I don't think we would be where we are without TikTok. Another thing that I did, I brought people from Gaza so people can get to know them in the West and get to humanize them. They hear the pain from their mouths. I feel sometimes that's also that type of education is also very important. If it's so, that's my last chip in. But thank you guys very much for having me.
Thank you, Ali. I wish we could use TikTok because of our work on the Uyghur cause. TikTok is a Chinese product, and unfortunately, but I'm sure others who are not joined to the Uyghur cause in that way, please go ahead and do use whatever means and tools are available to you. I did want to also extend our gratitude to our viewers on Muslim Network TV and those who joined us online. This webinar aims to amplify the calls for justice and to stand in solidarity with oppressed brothers and sisters around the world. Hopefully we continue to work together for a future where, we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, we know this as Muslims, Palestine will be free one day. And to work towards the cause, knowing that gives you so much more hope. And because, as Ahmed said, these causes are one. Our liberation is all tied together. The occupiers definitely join together and are one. And so it's time for the occupied to be joined together. So Jazakallah khair to everyone, and thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Has the recording live stream stopped? Wahid?